Welcome to this week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. I'm Katie Brinkley, and you're listening to the premier podcast for business owners ready to elevate their influence and impact in the industry. Have you ever wondered how digital marketing can revolutionize your business? Well, with 2 decades of experience empowering business leaders, consultants, and coaches, I understand the transformative power of digital marketing. Today, we're not just discussing strategies, we're crafting your digital legacy. In each episode, we'll dissect the trends, strategies, and insights that are shaping the future of marketing. You'll walk away with actionable knowledge to thrust your business forward and stories of local enterprises making a global impact. Are you ready to turn insights into action? Let's jump into today's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing and start shaping your legacy. Today's guest is a LinkedIn top voice. He's also an Emmy Award-winning media advisor who builds well-known brands for authorities as they navigate the ever-evolving landscape of media. He is a good friend that I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot better over the past year. We actually started running around in the same circles back in the Clubhouse days. It's amazing to me, as I think back to Clubhouse, what type of connections happened for me from that never-ending conference call. Today's guest, he knows and does a lot of work with a familiar face to Rocky Mountain Marketing, Judy Fox. They host LinkedIn Lives together all the time. And he's my guest today. So Vinny, LinkedIn Vin, I was going to say a better like LinkedIn Vin is the man of the hour today, but I kind of stumbled over my words. But Vinny, thank you so much for joining me on Rocky Mountain Marketing today.
Oh, Katie, it is so nice to be here. And it's the first time anyone has ever introduced me as a LinkedIn top voice. And I have to be honest, it sounds awesome. I love that. I'm so proud of that, like what we
You
did.
should be because so I'm a LinkedIn top podcasting voice and a LinkedIn top social media voice, but you're different. You actually have the keys to the LinkedIn machine with your LinkedIn top voice. Just explain to us a little bit what that is.
I mean, it's all perception. It's all perception, right?
It is, but it's a different color.
Well, you have the gold community top voice badges, a result of LinkedIn democratizing knowledge. They've allowed us to contribute to AI collaborative articles and in joining in and creating conversations that showcase our knowledge. We've become experts in our own skill set, which is a really cool place to be now. 13 years ago, or I think like 12 years ago, when they launched the LinkedIn Top Voice program, something that was launched from the editorial team at LinkedIn. I come from like old school MTV in the 90s where there was MTV The Network and MTV News. And like MTV The Network, we made TRL and the Osbournes and Punked. MTV News, Kurt Loder, Suchin Pak, Gideon Yago, 10 to the hour every hour. LinkedIn has a very similar mechanism. They have an editorial team. They create actual news articles that are published throughout the system and also distributed offline. I mean, online, off platform on Google and Bing and sort of everywhere else. The Top Voice program was built by the editorial team to bring in leaders in their categories. And it's been a privilege. I think they christen about 250 people a year is what I've been told and I understand. And man, what a calling it was. I'll say what, I love my TV background and I'm happy to talk about it bits and pieces where it's relevant. So much of my identity was wrapped up in what I did in television, on Bravo, on MTV, on A&E, and all the channels and networks and platforms that I worked on. The blue top voice badge that's currently sitting on my LinkedIn profile is a direct result of what I did in podcasting. That's number one, where we met through Podmatch and through that community. It was me honing in. I literally treated this platform, Podmatch, this magical place where hosts and guests can come together and connect. I literally treated Podmatch the same way I treated TRL Studios, the MTV Times Square studios back in the day. I was focused. I wanted to make impact with people who were in that room because I knew those people in that room were going into other rooms. And 3 years ago, when we were at Podfest, it was being surrounded by my peers. 2 years ago, it was seeing my picture every once in a while in someone's presentation because now they're speakers. And it's just been growing and growing since. It's been an honor to be in the podcasting world and to make impact and, to be really honest, not have my future be so dictated and predicated on my past. I did say that I got into podcasting to work on my heaven points because I did cast Housewives of Jersey and Millionaire Matchmaker and like some of the things that got us to where we are, for better or for worse. I take no blame or credit, by the way, but it's a powerful badge, and I can make change with it, and it's something that's seen still with a lot of weight as a thought leader, as a leader in change, as someone like me who likes to create conversations. I love supporting conversations that I'm not in charge of, or that I'm not the sole creator of said conversation, but it does allow you to do so much more and get a really quick return. It's been an honor.
Well, and I mean, you're known as LinkedIn Vin, but you also said if so much of what you've done has come from having a podcast. Your podcast name is I Have a
Oh yeah.
Podcast. So check it out. And you've had people like Mandy Moore and Ja Rule on it. And there's no denying that, your past with working in television definitely gave you a different insight of how so many of us as business owners are approaching the way we show up online and building out that brand awareness. One of the first things that I learned about from you was IMDb. Let's just quickly talk about what you were doing with IMDb and podcasting, because I think it's an entire, again, this is one of your superpowers of seeing things from an entirely different angle for business owners that, kind of is always just been used for Hollywood.
Yeah, it's funny. I think back to the late '90s and the Y2K days of MTV. I was working with solopreneurs. Literally, that's it. I worked with people who own their brand and own their business, and they were not big companies. They were solo individuals, or maybe a group. Beyonce had three or maybe five, depending on when you remember Destiny's Child, three people in her business. Mandy Moore was on stage by herself. Ja Rule, yes, had collaborators. So I started to learn how solopreneurs can integrate their products with Ashanti and other collaborators that he did. So it was a really cool opportunity to get to work with people who we now have so much more in common with, especially now that we can create content with our iPhones, because many of the people I worked with, their great ideas are owned by the networks that went ahead and bought them. IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, and it's owned by Amazon. I just to point that out first and foremost. We are talking about data. So Amazon is known infamously for data and how it sells and manipulates and uses our data differently. A big caveat to what we're about to talk about here, because I want to be very transparent in where this data is being nested and how it's being utilized. But imdb.com has a really high domain authority. Domain authority is the word that we give websites. There's basically Google has a score for how credible a website is. That's why LinkedIn.com has, and putting articles out from LinkedIn.com versus our own websites will yield usually more results in search, because LinkedIn.com is higher than, say, for example, I Have a Podcast.com has a higher domain authority. And IMDb is where we go to see what movies are out there, who directed them, what were the actors in, what other movies have those actors been in, film, TV, and recently they added intellectual property such as podcast to be an approved form of content that can be on that platform, which means that any single person who owns their podcast has the right, the privilege, by the way, to go to that platform and list their intellectual property, to claim their credits, to give credits to the people who work with them, to the people who support them, by the way. So if you have an editor, a writer, if you have a team of editors, not only are those people entitled to payment, by the way, also they're entitled to credit. I really truly believe in this creator economy. Credit's like the best way that we can celebrate each other.
You're looking at the lens of entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, like I said, through that Hollywood lens. And that's what's so unique about the way you approach. You said it earlier before I was hitting record, but search engine marketing, not search engine optimization, but marketing. And I thought that, man, you should definitely try and coin that term, because it's different. It's a way for you to be found through search using all these other platforms like LinkedIn, like IMDb, where they have the domain authority, but you're using them to grow your business and your brand. I'd love it if you kind of talk to us a little bit about how you're finding ways to gain leads using search engine marketing.
Crazy thing now in 2024 is like search engine is no longer the end result. Search engine results are now the input to chat GPT and other iterative AI outputs. So the first thing I want to point out is it's about data. And I realized on IMDb that if I it's about data, and I'll use one of Google's words, entities. And this is, I'll even bring it back to LinkedIn, for example. There's a reason why LinkedIn wants us to verify we are who we say we are. One of the unique attributes to being on LinkedIn is that we actually are the people who we are, and the transparency of that matters. On other platforms like X or Instagram, I can be whoever or whatever I want to be with a username. On LinkedIn, I am who I say I am, and I actually upload my ID and my Clear account, and I get verified for being the actual person. I communicate to LinkedIn that I, the person Vinnie Potestivo, am connected to the entity that is Vinnie Potestivo's profile on LinkedIn. What that allows LinkedIn to do is search the internet for any time I've ever been mentioned in the news. LinkedIn has an awesome AI product called Mint, mentioned in the news. And if Mint discovers that I've been talked about in a press article outside of LinkedIn, it will notify my followers inside of LinkedIn that I was mentioned in the news. And that's like the benefit of verifying, to be really honest, on LinkedIn right now, my entity. On Google, there's something called a knowledge panel. So if you've ever been on a desktop and you type in your name, who is Vinnie Potestivo, for example, pretend like remember when it was bad to admit that you like search for yourself on Google. Now
Yeah.
it's like, what's wrong with you?
You
You
haven't
don't you
searched
don't
for
pay
yourself? Yeah.
attention? Yeah, what's wrong with you? On the left are the search results, and on the right is something called a Google Knowledge Panel. And basically, what that panel is doing is saying, we have this information on a person, and if we can confirm, or IP, so it can be a person, a book, a movie, a company, basically that if we can confirm that the information from one website is guaranteed to be connected to this entity, that now brings that website into a deeper trust pattern with Google. So now, as we're talking from this website, it's actually filling in our Google Knowledge Panel. It's about connecting these two entities, us in the real life to the digital life. And that's what IMDb does nicely. IMDb, how it works is you start with the intellectual property. So, for example, I would upload, I have a podcast as intellectual property, not the actual episode, but just like the year that it was created, who produces it, who writes it, who directs it. I'm creating data points. And these data points are corroborated on the system because they also reflect, for example, yours. So if Rocky Mountain Marketing was on IMDb, Vinnie Potestivo would be listed as a guest. The benefit of that is if
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's ever seen any of my TV shows wants to come see what podcast I've been on, it gives Katie Brinkley and Rocky Mountain Marketing exposure because we're in that platform. But it also shows up in search results because it's data points that have been corroborated. I have won an Emmy. I don't wait for my Emmy news release to be the only reason why people know I have an Emmy. I made sure that that was in my IMDb profile as a data point because that shows up differently as Google, and specifically now Bing, since Bing is Microsoft, and Microsoft bought Chat GPT, and GPT
Mm-hmm.
uses Bing to crawl the internet, that now I can make sure that that information is sent to Chat GPT through Bing in a correct manner, that it understands the information and it's processing the information that I put into it, as opposed to assuming. The future of search and discoverability really relies on our clarity and transparency, and creating those data points. It's a killer way for visibility. If you have a podcast and someone helps you do something amazing, give them special thanks. It is the coolest form of digital networking you will ever see. It's like a digital handshake between two people. When they search for that person, your podcast will pop up, possibly your production company or your name will now show up in their search results because you simply empowered them and emboldened them on a platform that rewards creators. If you're not a podcast owner, being a guest, it's a great way to stand out.
Oh, yeah. When we first really started spending time together and getting to know each other better, you had at the time, I think, tell me in 2022 too, you had like I must say like 200 guest appearances or something crazy. Of Man, that's
Yeah,
insane.
yes.
How did you? You were everywhere on everyone's
Oh
podcast.
gosh. Again, I treated Podmatch like it was TRL. I said yes to every single person that I was in the room with because I trusted the room. Podmatch, Alicia and Alex, the people who created the platform, are salt of the earth and they just attract the right people. It's a premium platform. It does require people to pay to be able to be on it, but I appreciate that. I
Hmm.
appreciate the investment in self that takes. And also, I was on a couple of those other platforms that I had cancellations minutes before I was supposed to be recorded or just got ghosted completely. And that hasn't happened to me on Podmatch. I actually figured out, I sat down and I, with my spreadsheet, and I looked at every single quarter and every single month and every single week and every single day. And I said, what days would be best for me to be on podcasts? Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have a 90-minute block on Tuesday morning and I have a 120-minute block on Thursdays. That means I can do 3 half hours on Tuesdays and up to 4 half hours or 2 full hours if I wanted to on Thursday. By identifying that time, it allowed me to work backwards. What I did is I used Podmatch to not to create just options, but opportunities. And then when I had 20, 30, 40 yeses, I was able to look at my schedule and look at the yeses and see which ones worked best for me. That was how I was able to show up in my strength and not be
Hmm.
depleted in energy from talking so much. So,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time to get the mic right, the lighting right, the dogs are quiet, the Amazon's been delivered, the kids are at school. So once I figured that out, to be honest, I also created a Calendly link for me that allows podcast hosts to book the time on my calendar that works best for me. And then
Hmm.
I'm very happy to go in and fill out their forms because it is your show. I am a guest in your house. So like
Yeah.
always I'm like bonkers when I hear guests being like, I don't want to fill out another form. I'm like, whoa, yo, like I have gluten allergies. I'm not going to show up to dinner and throw all my allergies at you last minute. Like I want this to be a success for both of us. So
Oh,
I
Vinny.
do look at it as like being a guest at dinner for sure.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
funny
Yeah.
because
I bring my container for leftovers. I make sure I bring a good dish over.
oh, yeah, and I've eaten with you before, and you
Yeah.
were like,
Yeah. Oh, you
so
know.
you don't do that like that. You're like, oh yeah, well, by the way, I don't eat this, but it's okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, you don't expect people to make a bunch of changes. You're very nice,
Yeah.
very accommodating
I love
dinner guest.
collaborating. If I didn't like things other
Yeah,
people's way, I would just do stuff by myself. I love
right?
how different creative people are and how different their mind. I mean, like, working with the Osbournes versus working with Jess Simpson on Newlyweds versus working with Diddy on Making the Band, very different meetings, by the
Oh
way. I
yeah.
love I love that exposure.
So, Vinny, I want to circle back to what you said with the verification on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and because I've gone through that and I was like, well, of course I'm going to do it. It just so people know that it's really me because I'm never going to show up in your DMs telling you to buy cryptocurrency. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of people pretending to be me doing that. It was a no-brainer for me to do it. And I didn't even think of it in the way that you're again, like the way that you're talking about it with the data points. So talk to us a little bit of just about why you should be verified on a platform like LinkedIn and how it's different on a platform like on Instagram or Facebook.
It's a really cool opportunity, by the way, to get verified on LinkedIn. And we're not talking about a blue badge. We're literally talking a shield with a check mark in it, by the way. It just says, I
Hmm.
am who I say I am. I love LinkedIn because I love people who do things. I care more about impact than engagement. And this is like this is where you and I can really have a deep conversation considering how important engagement is to the visibility of posts versus making impact. I would rather you go do something with the information you have than just strictly sit in the post. The opportunity to be verified, one, it does shorten the gap. It says, I am who I say I am. I've worked where I said I worked. I know who I say I know. And the more people in my network that have verified profiles, the more it looks like I know exactly who I say I know, and that I'm actually able to convert that from a business perspective. It's also a badge that's carried with you throughout the entire platform. So being seen as who you truly are and having that check mark with the badge does help. It doesn't give you more exposure, and it doesn't give the platform the opportunity to give you more bandwidth in terms of pushing out your content, or at least that's what LinkedIn tells us it doesn't do. But there is an implication there. It is a badge. And by the way, just if you're in North America, Central America, and Canada, those are the three territories that are currently allowed to be verified on LinkedIn right now. If you go to linkedin.com/verify, you'll see exactly the place to put your birth date and your clear information if you use clear to travel, and a couple of other ways that you'll be able to verify yourself. Again, it doesn't cost anything at all. I'm lucky because I got a big old Vinnie Potestivo. Like, I got a big old name that not a lot of people have, by the way. So it's not like I get a lot of overlap and confusion in who I am, although no one can spell my last name ever. So that's why the hashtag linked Vin works for me. So I can to make it a little simpler. But by claiming I am who I am, and by listing my experience the way that I have, it makes it very clear what I'm capable of. I think that doing things on LinkedIn just equates to action more so than on Instagram or any other social platform. So to be able
Well,
to be me on a platform where business happens, that's exciting to me.
I couldn't agree more because you've gone all in on LinkedIn. I'm a part of your inner circle, which is I guess it's like your private DM channel over on Instagram. So I follow you on Instagram. I follow you on Snapchat or whatever
Yeah.
platforms that you're on. But really, you've focused on LinkedIn as your main social media hub. And I think that it's really smart to focus in on where one, you enjoy being, and two, where you're finding the leads. As we wrap up today's episode, you mentioned it earlier with having that LinkedIn badge and the kind of the responsibility that comes with it. And yet you also mentioned it too with just being verified. You are who you say you are. What I'm hearing you say is these social media platforms, there is a responsibility that comes when you show up on them, and there's so much more that can happen for you as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, when you treat it as, hey, this is who I am, this is who I, you can research, you can go on IMDb, you can, Google me like crazy. I am who I say I am, and what you can expect from me is the truth. I'm going to go out there and be the best business owner, be the best person I can be on this social media platform.
Yeah. By the way, LinkedIn really does give me like nostalgia to being in the halls of MTV for 10 years, and like just walking down the hallway through programming and then going to the talent department and seeing all of our friends who are in production and all the different types of shows. Like, it was very segmented, and I would get in trouble a whole lot at MTV because I was always way too social, and my phone was always ringing, and I was supposed to be there answering phones. It gives me that feeling of being able to walk down the hall and meet people who have experiences and expertise that have nothing to do with mine, but that we can complement each other really well. And even more so now, when I was at MTV, I was in talent development. No one in the world, it felt like, was in talent development. That was like a weird two-word thing, a weird department. Now that's human resources. Now there are full talent development executives, and there's a whole industry of talent development because the word talent has evolved to us, the off cameras, not just the traditional theatrically creative, artistically creatives that are out there, where talent was sort of synonymous with celebrity. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we show up on platforms like LinkedIn, where we can make things happen. So I worked with Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's dad, in the late 90s and early 2000s. I got to cast Beyonce in her first film ever, Carmen, a Hip Hopera, which are her first leading role. People say, well, duh, you put Beyonce in a film, big whoop. Everyone would like, that's such an easy and obvious answer. It wasn't, by the way. Ask Beyonce as a solopreneur back then, of a defunct band, that a group that didn't stay together and then fell apart and then regrouped, and then they had three different solo careers and then came back. They were doing things that the music industry didn't understand. What I came to learn was the power of the phone call. Matthew Knowles picked up the phone and called Nintendo. He called Pepsi. He pitched them. He pitched Beyonce and the Women of Destiny's Child to those brands because, to be honest, the platform didn't have millions of dollars of marketing in store for Destiny's Child or Beyonce, but Nintendo and Pepsi sure did. And by putting her in a Super Bowl commercial that would change the future of that beverage, and a couple of iconic other artists that were in that commercial, Pink, Shakira, Britney, and it was a pretty big, I think it was a pretty cool Enrique Iglesias. I'm trying to think of like that was the Super Bowl commercial that rocked my world back then. That phone call came as an outbound call because, like, look, I'll be honest. When we were casting Carmen, a hip opera on MTV, I do believe a call was made to the label, and I do believe the label, on behalf of the artist, passed because they weren't currently pursuing solo career and solo trajectory, which, like, to me was like, well, it's Carmen. Like, how, this is a cultural phenomenon. It's an artistic juggernaut of depth, and like, I think I understand that she might not be looking for her solo career, but like something just seemed off. And I had access to the TRL studio. I went downstairs, handed the sides to Mr. Knowles, and she showed up for an audition, by the way. It was the coolest audition of my entire career because, like, auditioning Beyonce is like something that, like, I can't even wrap my head around. In fact, I got like all performative, and I got like I was basically a video camera. I thought I was like the director of cat. Like I was like in it. I was like on the floor moving around. And John Singleton, who was the director of Carmen, said, "Vin, I just want you to be 5 inches from Beyonce's face. I just need to see her eye contact." So he literally took like his hand, my hand, Beyonce's face, like we were in a foot radius of each other. And I just remember beating myself up, thinking like, "Oh man." In casting, I get sensitive about taking away any energy from the star. It's someone's being judged right now. Like the last thing I need her to think is like I'm distracting, which is funny to think that I could do anything to pull away from Beyonce's shine. I later learned that what was happening in that room was when two 1% creators have the vision and can share a common goal, you don't need to micromanage and give constructive feedback. He didn't say, Beyonce, I need you to focus your eyes over here. He made me realize what I need to do is capture her eyes. And he audibly let her know that the shot was all about her eyes. She did one silent take, literally walked across the room. And then I tried to take the tape and make a copy for myself, but John took the tape, said, "I got it. I can digitize it myself. Thanks, Vin." By the way, it was that film that Beyonce learned about the art of character development, and that's where she came up with Sasha Fierce. And like that's cool to be a part of the ethos of a creator who
Yeah.
needed more space to be herself. And that's like the beginning of reality and reality TV, and like creating more space so that we can be the people that we can be, not the version that everyone wants us to be, but the version that we can be, not what we should be, but what we can be. And that was just a really powerful story to learn. And
Awesome.
thanks,
Yeah.
Beyonce, for that.
Yeah, that
Thanks,
man,
B.
that's awesome. Man, and I have all sorts of questions now, Vinny, on
Oh yeah.
what you think of her, her new her country album or her new country song that she just released during the Super Bowl. I was like, I never thought I would be down with like Beyonce singing country, but she's rocking it. So
Isn't that funny? Isn't it funny to think of I saw on a post on Instagram that was like Post Malone sing, playing a steel guitar is like the most country thing that this country has actually heard for like quite a while, even on country radio that's coming from.
yeah.
I think there's a real, and don't forget, she does come from Texas.
Yeah.
So there's the H Town Vicious right there. But it is a call out to the new Wild Wild West. And she's created genres of music that didn't exist before.
Well, Vinny, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me on Rocky Mountain Marketing today. Anytime I get to sit down with you, you really allow me to think of marketing and my business in a whole different way. That's what I love about you is that you bring in the stuff that we're already doing, but like, but wait a second, have you thought about it like this? Have you thought about the connecting on these data points that you talk about? Thank you so much for joining me. I think that you are a wealth of knowledge, and man, I would just love to listen to some more stories that you have of the MTV days, because the character arches and
Oh,
everything
yeah.
else that you've been able to do is really something. But if people, obviously, they can search the hashtag on LinkedIn, LinkedVin. So just add a V in there. So check out Vinny that way. You can connect with him there on LinkedIn, listen to his podcast, which is I Have a Podcast. What other ways can people connect with you and learn more about you and be up to date with all things Vinny?
To be honest, I'm just LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the absolute number one best place. I mean, it's my work home. I love it. I read my own inbox, which is like a weird thing to say, but like I treat it's precious. It's precious material to me. I'm a casting director by trade. I read messages that come to me. I'm built to help people get to where they want to go, and I can support you in ways that, like as you pointed out, maybe some people haven't thought of yet. I bring it all to LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that small businesses, solopreneurs, and even larger businesses that are on LinkedIn that are treating their talent communities well can thrive. And if I can make change on a business level, I can make change on a cultural level and a community level. I really believe in the power of us being integrated together and working together. And LinkedIn for me serves that purpose.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Rocky Mountain Marketing today.
You rock. I love you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. I hope you're leaving with valuable insights and the inspiration to lead your market. If you've enjoyed our time together and found today's podcast episode useful, I have a small favor to ask of you. Please hit that subscribe button to stay updated with the latest episodes. And if you know someone who could benefit from these episodes, maybe a fellow business leader or an aspiring entrepreneur, go ahead and share this episode with them. Let's spread the knowledge and grow together. Also, I'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation beyond the podcast. Visit me at katiebrinkley.com to connect, to find more resources, or just to share your journey. And be sure to pick up your copy of my new book, The Social Shift, at katiebrinkley.com/book. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Katie Brinkley, and I can't wait to dive into more strategies and stories with you on the next episode of Rocky Mountain Marketing. Let's keep on taking your marketing to new heights.